Primarying any incumbent in Congress is a difficult task, but it is particularly bold when you target the most powerful incumbent in Congress, perhaps Nancy Pelosi. And the person that bold joins us now on the Damage Report. Agatha Basilar, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. And in a little bit, I do want to turn to Nancy Pelosi specifically. But first, I would like to get to know you a little bit better, have our audience get to know you a little bit better. And so you are one of a number of primary challengers entering electoral politics for the first time. Tell us about your background.
Sure. So I'm originally from Brazil and then moved to the United States, where I grew up with my mom and in the public school system. I got a scholarship to go to Stanford, where I studied design and engineering. For the last 5 years, I've been working on documentary filmmaking and political advocacy across a variety of social justice issues. And it's being on the ground with the people and in the places where justice is most urgently needed that I saw so much unnecessary suffering that I believe is preventable. And since then, I've also started a nonprofit called Democracy Earth that builds decentralized open source voting software.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you mentioned your background in engineering. Our producers were looking into what percentage of currently elected congressmen and women have backgrounds in science or tech, and it's like nothing. And sometimes it's pretty obvious that it's nothing. So back during, sometimes like a tech executive will come in and they'll ask questions, and it's almost like they're like asking like their niece how to like reboot their computer or something. So from your point of view, having a background in this, what do you think having more elected representatives with knowledge of science and technology, what could that bring?
Right. Yeah, I think it's only 3% of members of the House of Representatives have any sort of STEM background. And here in the district, a majority of us are millennial tech workers. So I feel like I bring an understanding of that demographic. And I feel like we've gotten to a point where technology has broken democracy. So we need representatives who do have that sophisticated understanding for how technology could actually improve democracy. Why is it that we mostly only show up for an election every few years and then have our representatives go off with a vote when we could be collecting the majority interest in real time using technology?
Exactly. Now, turning to the primary, you are going to be going against Nancy Pelosi. What issues would you cite as the biggest differentiating factors between you and Nancy Pelosi? What are the biggest substantive differences between you two on policy?
I'd say I represent more progressive values. I support the Green New Deal, dramatic climate action, and creating millions of great new jobs, Medicare for all. And fundamentally, I believe in getting big money out of politics. So that cuts across multiple issues as well.
And is that going to influence your own funding during the primary and possibly the general election? What's your philosophy on fundraising?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, this is a grassroots campaign, and so we're not accepting any corporate PAC money.
Okay, well that's always good to hear. Now we've noticed a pattern over the past few years that primary challengers are not well received necessarily by the DNC, the DCCC. I have to assume that Nancy Pelosi will be, in particular, protected by those organizations. Has there been any communication with the DNC or the DCCC just yet from your campaign?
Not direct communication, although when I filed for candidacy, I did get some calls from members of the Democratic Party asking me to run elsewhere. But the blacklist has certainly affected our campaign, both in positive and negative ways, where we were signed up with software providers, and then they would have to say, sorry, you're on the blacklist. We actually have to terminate your contract. But then other people have raised their hand and said, sign me up for that blacklist. I want to support young, more diverse voices like you.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to get an idea of basically how do you go about running a campaign against somebody as well known, obviously in the district, but also nationally as Nancy Pelosi. What are some of the themes that you expect will come up during this primary challenge?
Right. There is a strong, Nancy Pelosi has been our representative for longer than I've been alive. And so there is support for her. And I think in this race, you can acknowledge, you can say thank you for your service, but it's time for a new generation of leadership. But also realistically, the biggest demographic in San Francisco are millennials, are young people. And I think it's our time, and we see that there's not this understanding of our issues. We have become the emblem of income inequality. We already talked about technology. And so all of those issues are going to come to the fore in this election.
Yeah. Well, it is certainly going to be an exciting election. We're going to be keeping an eye on it. Hopefully we can talk a little bit more as it proceeds. But Agatha Bassler, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thanks, John.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.